Hi, thank you for having me and thank you for coming. I'm super excited to talk to you about everything Pete just stole my thunder of, you know. Anyways, why is this not clicking? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a bit about how we've gotten to the point that we've come, considering all of the problems we have in our data pipeline and our business problems. So, without further ado, this is the outline that we're going to go through, right? A bit about RTR, who we are, what we do, problems we have, a bit about our analytics, so how analytics and tech works together to solve these problems, some evolution stuff. So, you know, we didn't just come up with this. We had to go through different stages to get to the point that we're at and to influence the business. And then we'll talk a bit about Luigi. So, sorry, that's like a little further into the talk. So hold your horses. And then we're going to talk about what I have planned for the future. So first, a bit about RTR. Who here has rented from Rent the Runway? Oh my gosh. I think there's more guys than girls. This is I really like that. So like Pete said, you know, we rent dresses for a fraction of the cost. It's basically, you interface through a website, right? So we can give you a gown, we can give you cocktail dresses, jewelry, and now we can give you more like everyday wear. But we can only show you things that are available for you. So this depends on three key pieces of information, right? So we have to know when your event is, when you want your dress, what size you are, and where you are in the United States. And this determines availability of all of our dresses. We like to think of it as a way that we can compete with fast fashion, right? So you can swap things in and out. You don't have to worry about what is in style because you're always going to be in style if you rent with us. Right, so different gowns. We've also expanded kind of our core business. So now we have rental or retail stores. So you can come to one of our stores, try on all of the products and decide what works for you, what doesn't, and you'll guaranteed to have a wonderful event. We've also launched a subscription-based program, so this is more for jewelry and everyday wear, like jackets, casual jewelry. I guess they call it fine jewelry. And this means that you can get 3 different pieces for as long as you want. You can swap them in and out. You can keep them as long as you pay us for them. So, you know, the general model is like, okay, you see a fabulous dress, you want to wear it, so we provide access to that. And this is, the value proposition is that you don't have to pay for that whole dress that you may only wear once, and you only pay a fraction of the retail cost. Generally, it's about 10% of the price, but we'll get into that later. But then you never have to wear the same thing twice. You don't have to have anything hanging out in your closet. And we make fashion accessible. So you may never wear an Hervé Leger, but today you can. In practice, we deal with reverse logistics, right? We're dealing with humans, we're dealing with real inventory, and this creates lots of problems because humans are error prone, right? We're not just a website or an online abstraction of our products. We have to barcode every single product, and we have to know where it is at every single moment. We have to know when it's going to be available in the future, how far we can ship that for a given person, given when they want it, given other rentals around it. And it's just a huge optimization problem, right? We have people that want things, and we have inventory, and how do we match that up accordingly? And not only that, we have to, you know, like Pete said, we have to bring in the inventory from shipping. We have to be able to process it, which means we're doing QA, we're dry cleaning things, we're racking them, we're putting them out for shipment again. And this is just like a lot of things that can go wrong, right? Things can get lost, things can get broken, and there's always going to be infinite number of edge cases. I don't know if we care about that. Okay, so the basic motto that we live by is everything can be solved through technology, right? We're not going to scale just by people alone or inventory alone or more people looking at the problem. We really need a system that can understand all of the moving components, and it can do that global optimization. What we really do is just strive to focus on how data can help us solve all of our problems. So this means that, analytics and engineering are really solving these problems. It's not just someone dictating from on high telling us what we're supposed to do. We have to push for everything being tracked. And this is really the reason that we've succeeded. We make data relevant to everyone, so people aren't just throwing features out there. We're telling them how those features are relevant and how they affect the customer. Because the big optimization problem is really about making sure that we're optimizing on customer happiness and that we're getting the most out of our dresses that we can. Comments? Okay, no questions. So the way that data gets surfaced is this goes to executives, as you would expect, right? We do analytics, we send reports out, people make business decisions based on those. We also create, we see where there's places that we can create value. So there's something that's taking too long, there's something that can be fixed. Analytics can tell you where those problems are and how to fix them. And then when you launch website features, we do the general tracking of all the metrics and supporting those algorithms that power all of the features. So it's this huge feedback loop, right? We're not just there to give you numbers and throwing them out there. We're an intrinsic part of the whole organization. Right, so the general structure I think about our engineering platform is there's demand, so there's people coming to our website, there are features we're launching, there's people interacting with it, there's transactions that happen, we have to fulfill those. And then on the other side, there's supply, right? This is the physical constraints that we have on our system. This is the number of inventory, this is how fast we can process a dress, and how long a dress is expected to last. And how do we tie individual dresses to individual people is through something called our reservation calendar, which Will has a big part in. And this is like each of these services, right, they're not done in a specific way. They can have MySQL backends, Mongo, they could be streaming, and everything I have to do is ingest all of that and make it accessible to the rest of analytics. So for instance, you're not supposed to just like read this. This is just to show you how messy this system can be, right? So these are all of our individual services. And I'm part of that data liberation front that's going to take all of those back-end databases and make them accessible for me and combine all the data in as many ways as possible that makes sense. For example, some of these are purely data-driven services. So we have a pixel log, so we can track everything that a user is doing on the website. We see what they're clicking on, what they're viewing, and that gets surfaced to us, and we can combine it with these tables. We also have a service called Alchemy, which is our experiment service. And using this combined with our ability to flag features, we can do A/B testing. So we can bucket users, limit users according to what device they're on, if they're logged in or anonymous. And I think at any given time, we're running between 10 and 20 experiments. Does that sound right? Sure, we'll go with that. But that's just stuff that's enabling analytics to do more with everything that's going on. Some other cool things we can do is we're actually showing where analytics is in control of what the user is seeing on the front end. So we have personalized recommendations. We can sort the dresses how we want the customer to see them. We can also tell you how similar dresses are. We look at how often a user comes back, look at attributes of the dresses, what seasonality is doing to this. And we can say, okay, like do collaborative filtering and say like, oh, people are buying these or renting these necklaces with these outfits. So we can try to upsell you and tell you how to accessorize your outfit. The fine print on this is that means that production and engineering processes are depending on us, right? They're giving us the trust to actually influence what people are doing. And I didn't realize this until I talked to other companies, but usually analytics is just someone that's just like writing reports, right? They're not actually having control on what people are doing with the product. Other places this shows up is we have a demand forecast, so we can look at how do we price a product such that we ensure that a customer is happy, right? We're not gonna price it too low such that everyone wants the same dress and we can't fulfill that. And we're not gonna price it so high that nobody wants that dress. And then on the right, this is a representation of how we track inventory. So we know the whole life cycle of an individual unit, and we can look at for a given style and a given size, how does the number of units change over time, and how does that affect future reservations? So we can look at UPS data, repair data, and see, try to tell customers before they have a sad experience with us that maybe they should try another dress. Okay, so I think that's all pretty cool. Hopefully you guys do too. But we didn't just get here, right away. We had to grow into this. So I like to think of it in a few distinct phases, right? There's phase 0, where you're a startup and you're like, oh, okay, let's just get things out there. Let's start creating features. We're outgrowing our current needs. What do we want for the future? We don't know. We're just going to put it all out there, see what happens. And you're doing, this is all really fast. You're just trying to stay relevant. And as an engineer, you're just like, YOLO, let's do this, okay? We're just going to change data structures. We're going to create new things. Everything's in a different tool and language. Are we done yet? All right. So what this means for an analyst is it's a little bit like this, right? You're just overwhelmed. You're just trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing. So you're trying to maintain cleanness and accuracy. You're rewriting business logic because the engineers don't care about it. They're just trying to get something out there. We're making the data relevant to other people other than just serving the website or running the warehouse. And this is good because as analysts, we like to hoard data. So that means that we have the best history, we have the longest history, we have everything. Right, and all we're really doing is trying to keep it together. Keep it together. Keep it together. And as an analyst, then, this means that you have to have some sense of data engineering. You have to know how to fetch the data. You have to be able to access it no matter how it's stored. You may be working off production tables, maybe copies of production tables. And there's no time to really invest in a process, right? So what this looked like for us is just a bunch of random bash scripts. They're just everywhere. Nobody cares or knows what they're doing, but somebody liked it enough to write it. But this creates a nice breeding ground, right, for the primordial soup to like coalesce and be like, oh, wait, I see some similarities between things going on. And you start to create modules that can help you fetch easier. You write summary tables, and you glue all of your SQL together with PHP. Perl. Well, both. That's really the best way to do that, I'm pretty sure. But really, you're just like removing that monotony of running reports over and over again. Maybe you can email them out. Maybe you create a website to host data. And then at the same time as you're like, things look to be getting better, engineering is like, hey, you know what? You know how everything's written in Drupal? Let's rewrite it into Java. And you're just like, why would you create a whole nother set of tables that now I have to track and understand? So you're going to have to dual write to everything. Cool. Yeah, so, like, this is probably good because they're making a deliberate decision, and we can kind of draw off those choices, right? So we can be like, oh, like, they see a future, they want to make this scalable, how about we do the same thing? And this is where you get to phase 2, which is where we started to create some semblance of a pipeline. So we created we bought Vertica, right? So we just dump everything in there. We have one source of truth. We can do all of our ETLs, so we can move data from MySQL into Vertica, from Mongo into Vertica. We can transform it to make it interesting for everyone else like, understandable instead of like obscure column names. It actually makes sense. And at the same time, we started rewriting our framework into Python. And some of our requirements were, well, we're growing as a company. Not everyone is a data engineer, so we need them to be able to contribute to our pipeline. So we need this script to handle any type of program. It can be shell scripts, Python scripts, Perl, PHP. It can access any sort of database, and it doesn't have to be something that someone has to learn and to program, right? They don't want to do that. So, for example, a lot of our processes come from replicated data sets in MySQL, and then we pull them into Vertica because it's much faster in Vertica. And so we do this nightly load. And as an analyst, you can just go in and just be like, oh, just add a new line to this config file, and it's great. So a bit about this config file. So this is an example of one that controls our order warehouse. And all it says is like there's a comment section. There's like, OK, what kind of program do I need to run this with? What is the file that I need to run? And then you just kind of write them out like a recipe. Do 1, 2, 3, 4. And the great part about this is you don't have to know much other than, push and pull on Git. You need to know SQL or how to write a script, which can be pretty easy. And then a little bit about the command line. But that's a pretty low bar, right? Like most people can figure out how to do 5 or 6 commands. So like when they want to run it, you're just like, oh, I'm going to run this job, order warehouse, right? Boom, done. Or you just want to be like, I want to see what all the steps are. And then we also have control into only doing certain parts of that pipeline. And the meat and potatoes of this is it basically shells out, right? So we have a function that's just run process. It takes essentially the command and tries to run that in a shell and catches exceptions. It does some logging. It retries given proprietary like errors because we're on an old version of Vertica, so it tends to lose connections willy-nilly. So we can like be like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Rerun it. We have alerting on this, but it's really simple, super simple, and I like it. And with this kind of framework, we have been able to keep up with engineering, right? In 1 year, like last year, which was a relatively slow year, they tell me, they rewrote our entire commerce services. So they rewrote how we deal with transactions and how we deal with order changes. We've rewritten the back end of inventory service, so how we track the life cycle of a unit. That's completely new. We have our new subscription-based service with new inventory. We launched retail stores, which meant understanding point-of-sale systems and how to deal with appointments. And we've also added the ability to change prices dynamically. And through, like, the great part about this pipeline is that it shortens that feedback loop. So now that we have alerting and monitoring on everything, and they're all going through the same kind of process, we can tell engineering when things are going wrong or unexpected. So we're keeping them reliable and not just finding these errors when we decide to run a report. Like, let's say you want to run a report on how many orders we're getting, and you don't realize until 3 months later that you're missing pixel information on orders. It's never happened to me. OK, then we get to where I am now, which is a pretty good place, right? We've kind of caught up on everything. Things are kind of working. But this is all about exposing weaknesses, right? So we're adding more alerting, adding more monitoring, finding the quick wins on how we can make this a faster and more efficient process. What is the dead things that we can just kill that nobody really cares about anymore? And I really just like increasing visibility into our platform. I want other people to get excited and to know what we're working on, so we can communicate efficiently between engineers and analysts, right? Like, there shouldn't be this big divide. Not that there ever is, but like, it can happen. We want them invested in what we're doing also. But the biggest questions I have here is, how do we keep this engine running, right? How do we keep doing this without having me go in and rerun jobs? How do I remove the whole human part of this? And while we're still like expanding everything that we want to do. We want to add more data. We want to change how the data looks. So part of this is all about flexibility. We want to add dependencies, right? So when one thing fails, I don't want to restart 10 things in a specific order. And this is where we get to Luigi. So I'm assuming, because we're in Spotify, so everyone knows what Luigi is, right? We just get it by osmosis. Is that? Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm not going to go over that. JKs. Okay, so it's basically a dependency manager that builds complex pipelines of batch data, right? I like it because it's written in Python, which means that I can extend it, I can change it, I can troubleshoot it, right? It already has built-in functionality to work with batch and daily jobs, which is most of what our pipeline is. And it easily deals with failures, so it will automatically know when something's failed, it needs to rerun, and there's this whole chain of like things paused until that other thing is fixed. I also like it because I can integrate it with our current system without having to change any of the benefits, right? I want to be able to put this in the back end such that nobody knows that Luigi is actually controlling what's going on. People can still contribute, add steps to all of their jobs, and they don't care, right? So really simply, what this looks like is we have our run job before. Instead, we can just extend one of the Luigi task class such that it calls that, essentially, right? This is no different than what we were doing before. It still just runs one step at a time, whatever. But what we really want is it to know about the whole chain of events. So instead, we tell it, OK, we want to go from step 0 to step 100. And the way to do this is through the requires function. So we overwrite that, and we say, OK, actually, before you run step 100, you need to run step 99. So we just do this recursively. That was pretty cool. And then we can like expand all of our config files to call each other, and then we just have this big configuration tree of what is going on. I've also added the ability to force a rerun, which like is something that happens for us when we need to test something. So we can just like make Luigi forget that it ever run something today, and then we can just run it again. Okay, yeah, so that's Luigi, what I did. But this is going to set us up for the future, and of course there's always more that we're going to do. And the future is to become our data pipeline. We are one with it. Like we want to take ownership of pixels. We want to be even more integrated with engineering. Like there's not going to be a definition of analytics and engineering. We can make this less reactionary, and we need to deal with scaling problems, obviously, right? Do we want to do real time? How do we deal with more data? What happens when we reach all of our capacity and it takes 24 hours to run everything? Do we want to do Hadoop? I don't know. But some problems that we're facing right now are, before we get to the next step, is how do we deal with testing and QA and dev environments? Because apparently that's a really cool thing, so you don't mess up production data. Like we want to be able to flexibly change code and change what we're looking at and have reliable hardware that doesn't take 2 days to recover from. And part of this is all about removing that proprietary information. So we want everything into the Git repo, right? We don't want there to be like someone being like, oh, wait, I know how the data gets there. If you look in blah, blah, blah over here, it pulls data X, Y, and Z. And you're just like, well, that's great. I'm glad somebody knew that because nobody else knew what was going on. So it's all about making it documented and intuitive for someone to just get on board quickly. So like, and even non-technically, we need to get engineers super excited about what we're doing, right? We want them excited about being data-driven, and they don't just release things into the wild without being worried about how it's performing and how it's impacting the business. Because engineering is all about impacting the business. They're the ones driving it. They're controlling how we succeed or fail. And of course, we're always better together than we are on our own. It's great. And being a data-driven culture isn't something that just you do once and then you're always data-driven. You have to continually reinforce that, just like a big feedback loop. And also making sure our reports are reliable and people trust what we're doing. So most of that, I think, is all about transparency. and no longer playing catch up. So like overall, there's this transformation of you're overwhelmed and crazy, but there's a turning point where you're like, oh wait, I can look at the future and I can see how we can build these systems and how we can be reliable and influence things better, and maybe just be a little faster. So in conclusion, I think we have lots of cool problems, and I feel like these are problems that a lot of people have, but that there is no one good way or that people have found, right? Like, we found a solution that works for us, but there's nothing out there specifically that I found that was like, oh, that's the ringer. That's what's going to happen for us. And we're given a lot of autonomy to do what we want to do, right? We can look at the complete problem and make decisions. We're given the opportunity to make mistakes and to think about the future and think about the direction of analytics. So we will become one with computers, hopefully. Oh, and we're hiring. That's all. Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
Sure. Hello? Yeah. So when you look at behavior data of consumers who are making purchases, actually paying consumers, so do you see a lot about a similar kind of a user profile? So in terms of patterns, and would you say so how roughly how many different profiles are there? Do you categorize people by different user profiles?
Oh, like for marketing purposes or for assigning what a person should view?
So so let's say a person makes decision A and B, and based on that, do you make kind of predictions as to what person might like and give more kind of suggestions?
Yeah, so part of our recommendation system is personalized. So we correlate a person with what they're looking at, and then obviously what other people are looking at those same dresses. When we put that within a 3-month time frame, so we say okay, we can create similar users based on what kind of attributes of those dresses that they like.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi. Do you use click data? So as far as click data goes, do you concentrate on users that don't necessarily purchase anything, or focus your energy on helping people that do purchase things?
Can you be more specific?
So if I'm a user and I don't buy anything, but my click data has given you non-trivial amounts of information.
Oh, retargeting them.
Yeah, do you actively retarget
Yes.
customers? Okay.
So we are integrated with sail-through, so we can tell them, hey, this person looked at these dresses, and we push them emails to say you should go back because they may run out of that dress.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead first. Come to you next.
You mentioned A/B testing with Alchemy. Is that your own custom solution, or?
Yeah, so that's something that we wrote.
So you didn't consider using a Adobe Test and Target or Optimizely or anything?
No, we had a system already in place before we had thought of those solutions, and so we just made it more robust and accessible for everyone to use.
You mentioned Hadoop briefly. Have you guys used Hadoop or Spark or anything like that in conjunction with Luigi? And I guess more generally, where do you kick your jobs off to? How is that infrastructure set up?
So our jobs are kicked off through cron, really simply. Yeah, it's awesome. We do not use Hadoop currently or Spark, but we're looking at those as options for the future. We played around with Storm a little bit just to deal with our A/B framework and getting results right away, but that never made it to fruition.
So just, I guess quickly, do you not like you don't encounter trouble with like the size of the data or stuff, it's still manageable without?
It's still manageable at the moment, but we know that we're going to have problems. So
Cool.
we're doing that investigation now.
Thank you.
So you may have touched on this, I may have just missed it, but do you foresee kind of your data collection going further upstream than just Rent the Runway, going actually to the designers or at least distributors to kind of like maybe influence or at least kind of inform some of the design decisions to say, well, we're seeing a lot of customers kind of like going for these types of designs and things like that, and maybe kind of affecting the industry as well?
Yeah, so when we partner with designers, we do give them information about how well a dress is performing. So that includes like different attributes, and we can share that with them. But it's up to them whether they want to abide by that.
And do you find that they're receptive to that, or is that something that they're still like, what's this data thing that I'm seeing?
I think it depends on the designer, obviously. So like I think Clover Canyon is a good example of they have a very reliable product that we have customers respond well to, and that survives the product lifetime. So like it can go through a lot of customers before we have to retire it. And they're very different from someone who like is purely like mesh fabrics or lace, which can deteriorate. But that also depends on our buying decisions.
Before the talk, it was mentioned that like, you know, what if there's a blizzard or a storm in a certain city, then you guys have to be prepared to handle orders that are affected by that?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do you guys use like any statistical models or like how do you go about ensuring that somebody gets the right thing or close to the right thing in time and then you get it back in time?
So the reservation calendar is like the brains behind everything, so that determines what someone can rent. So if a customer rents something for a specific time and it ends up not being possible due to a storm, like we have to tell them, like for a storm you can't really do anything, right? We can't ship it out, but we don't take in information about weather beforehand. What do you want? I think it's a very messy question. Yeah, he can tell you.
How about kids?
What?
Kids.
Kids? Like
Handle kids
children's
or-
clothing?
Yeah, teenage kids.
I think we haven't done that yet, but I think there has to be time to figure out if there's a market for people. Yeah, prom dresses. That's
I
close
think we're
enough.
asking about all the market trade secrets of Rent the Runway.
Right. I know nothing.
Anyone else?
Oh my God.
Hi, sorry. I was just curious about sort of the sizing of the data sets, the number of events, the types of events, and then also what sort of tools your data scientists are using.
Okay.
To sort of do the predictive modeling, et cetera.
The second one is easier. So right now there is no strict rule about what kind of language they can use. So there's everything from R to Python, Java, and Scala in production that we have contributed to. The second question about what events we look at, mostly everything. So anytime you click on the website, so this can be, like the basic funnel is you show up on the website, you go to a dress page, you enter in your zip code and your size, you open up the calendar to see what dresses, like what dates are available, you click one, you add it to cart. And then there's all of the information related to specific experiments. So like what is being popped up, what are people clicking, are they responding to like the right hand rail of like past viewed dresses. So does that help? Okay.
I mean, so we have a lot of sort of trouble validating our predictive models. So I was sort of curious also about how you, sorry, so you sort of create these models that are, you know, the core of your business is the ability to predict the future with all this sort of messiness. And then of course you have confidence intervals. I guess I was curious, like, how do your data scientists validate that the predictive models are healthy and sort of accurate?
I mean, we do like bootstrapping, and I think there's some tenfold validation in there. But I mean, we work on past data before we go looking at the future, or we run experiments until we get enough data to say like, oh yeah, that agreed with our hypothesis or didn't.
Hi. So I thought I heard you guys mention that you really aren't using Hadoop, really.
No.
So how are you dealing with stuff that like, isn't necessarily just like a select from Vertica, but like, larger data that you want to put together? Is it just like one machine, you're just, brute forcing it, or what techniques are you using for that?
Yeah, for most of the, like, Vertica is like a cluster, right? So we usually stick everything in Vertica that we ever want to analyze because it has the power behind it. So if it's in like some JSON format, we try to make it into something that's relational and then stick it in there.
Like stuff that you wanted to analyze, like if you want to do like collaborative filtering, right? You could maybe like write some custom Vertica plugins or something, but
right.
Well, something that was like isn't necessarily just like a SQL select or crunching or some summarization.
Yeah, R has the ability to plug into Vertica also, so it can take handle of that.
Someone else?
I think in the back.
I can't see. Oh, here we go. Thanks.
Hi. So you mentioned that you write reports for executives, but you also send data to the engineering teams. Can you talk a little bit about what you give to the engineering teams? Do you give dashboards? Do you give reports? Do you just go over and talk to them?
Yes, all of those things. I would say there's kind of two main pipelines of how we send data back for surface to the website or for the business. One of them are like daily batch jobs that then we give them CSVs in a certain format and they consume those. Other ways are we actually write production code with them. So those are like Scala and Java problems where we're writing fulfillment and then we're taking in all of the data that they're getting in that way. But we're handling the algorithms.
Anyone else?
So in the reservation calendar, are you planning on sort of coming up with likelihood estimators of transactions taking place on time and things like that?
So we know that through like demand forecasting and just like understanding how reservations build up over time, we can take a look at a specific dress on a specific weekend because the way that people rent is usually the best we can do is one dress out per week, right? So it's kind of a weekly cycle. So if we focus on a weekend, we can see how reservations build up over time, and that's kind of an exponential, right, growth. So it's like 2 weeks out, we get probably 50% of our reservations, and then 50% the next 2 weeks. Oh gosh, what was your question?
Do you plan on coming up with likelihood estimators of transactions, taking place successfully?
Right. So from that, like, if once we get out 2 weeks out, right, we kind of have enough reservations such that we can predict where we're going to end up on the number of reservations given that price. But yeah, there is obviously some flexibility in that.
All right, great. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Let's give her a hand again.